Chapter 23. When the current of life had resumed its course, I could not believe that the day which I saw dawning would not be like those which had preceded it. There were moments when I fancied that some circumstance which I could not recollect had obliged me to spend the night away from Marguerite, but that, if I returned to Bougival, I should find her again as anxious as I had been, and that she would ask me what had detained me away from her so long. When one's existence has contracted a habit, such as that of this love, it seems impossible that the habit should be broken without at the same time breaking all the other springs of life. I was forced from time to time to reread Marguerite's letter, in order to convince myself that I had not been dreaming. My body, succumbing to the moral shock, was incapable of movement. Anxiety, the night walk, and the morning's news had prostrated me. My father profited by this total prostration of all my faculties to demand of me a formal promise to accompany him. I promised all that he asked, for I was incapable of sustaining a discussion, and I needed some affection to help me to live after what had happened. I was too thankful that my father was willing to console me under such a calamity. All that I remember is that on that day, about 5 o'clock, he took me with him in a hired carriage. Without a word to me, he had had my luggage packed and put up behind the carriage with his own, and so he carried me off. I did not realize what I was doing until the town had disappeared, and the solitude of the road recalled to me the emptiness of my heart. Then my tears again began to flow. My father had realized that words even from him would do nothing to console me, and he let me weep without saying a word, only sometimes pressing my hand as if to remind me that I had a friend at my side. At night, I slept a little. I dreamed of Marguerite. I woke with a start, not recalling why I was in the carriage. Then the truth came back upon me, and I let my head sink on my breast. I dared not say anything to my father. I was afraid he would say, "You see, I was right when I declared that this woman did not love you." But he did not use his advantage, and we reached C without his having said anything to me except to speak of matters quite apart from the event which had occasioned my leaving Paris. When I embraced my sister, I remembered what Marguerite had said about her in her letter, and I saw at once how little my sister, good as she was, would be able to make me forget my mistress. Shooting had begun, and my father thought that it would be a distraction for me. He got up shooting parties with friends and neighbours. I went without either reluctance or enthusiasm, with that sort of apathy into which I had sunk since my departure. We were beating about for game, and I was given my post. I put down my unloaded gun at my side and meditated. I watched the clouds pass. I let my thought wander over the solitary plains, and from time to time I heard someone call to me and point to a hare not 10 paces off. None of these details escaped my father, and he was not deceived by my exterior calm. He was well aware that, broken as I now was, I should some day experience a terrible reaction, which might be dangerous, and without seeming to make any effort to console me, he did his utmost to distract my thoughts. My sister, naturally, knew nothing of what had happened, and she could not understand how it was that I, who had formerly been so light-hearted, had suddenly become so sad and dreamy. Sometimes, surprising in the midst of my sadness my father's anxious scrutiny, I pressed his hand as if to ask him tacitly to forgive me for the pain which, in spite of myself, I was giving him. Thus a month passed. But at the end of that time, I could endure it no longer. The memory of Marguerite pursued me unceasingly. I had loved, I still loved this woman so much that I could not suddenly become indifferent to her. I had to love or to hate her. Above all, whatever I felt for her, I had to see her again, and at once. This desire possessed my mind, and with all the violence of a will which had begun to reassert itself in a body so long inert. It was not enough for me to see Marguerite in a month, a week. I had to see her the very next day, after the day when the thought had occurred to me. And I went to my father, and told him that I had been called to Paris on business, but that I should return promptly. No doubt he guessed the reason of my departure, for he insisted that I should stay. But, seeing that if I did not carry out my intention, the consequences, in the state in which I was, might be fatal, he embraced me, and begged me, almost with tears, to return without delay. I did not sleep on the way to Paris. Once there, what was I going to do? I did not know. I only knew that it must be something connected with Marguerite. I went to my rooms to change my clothes, and as the weather was fine and it was still early, I made my way to the Champs-Élysées. At the end of half an hour, I saw Marguerite's carriage at some distance coming from the Rond-Point to the Place de la Concorde. She had purchased her horses, for the carriage was just as I was accustomed to see it. But she was not in it. Scarcely had I noticed this fact, when looking around me, I saw Marguerite on foot, accompanied by a woman whom I had never seen. As she passed me, she turned pale, and a nervous smile tightened about her lips. For my part, my heart beat violently in my breast, but I succeeded in giving a cold expression to my face, as I bowed coldly to my former mistress, who just then reached her carriage, into which she got with her friend. I knew Marguerite. This unexpected meeting must certainly have upset her. No doubt she had heard that I had gone away, and had thus been reassured as to the consequences of our rupture. But, seeing me again in Paris, finding herself face to face with me, pale as I was, she must have realized that I had not returned without purpose, and she must have asked herself what that purpose was. If I had seen Marguerite unhappy, if, in revenging myself upon her, I could have come to her aid, I should perhaps have forgiven her. And certainly I should have never dreamt of doing her an injury. But I found her apparently happy. Someone else had restored to her the luxury which I could not give her. Her breaking with me seemed to assume a character of the basest self-interest. I was lowered in my own esteem as well as in my love. I resolved that she should pay for what I had suffered. I could not be indifferent to what she did, consequently, what would hurt her the most would be my indifference. It was, therefore, this sentiment which I must affect, not only in her eyes, but in the eyes of others. I tried to put on a smiling countenance, and I went to call on Prudence. The maid announced me, and I had to wait a few minutes in the drawing-room. At last, Madame Duvernoy appeared and asked me into her boudoir. As I seated myself, I heard the drawing-room door open. A light footstep made the floor creak, and the front door was closed violently. "I am disturbing you," I said to Prudence. "Not in the least. Marguerite was there. When she heard you announced, she made her escape. It was she who has just gone out." "Is she afraid of me now?" "No, but she is afraid that you would not wish to see her." "But why?" I said, drawing my breath with difficulty, for I was choked with emotion. The poor girl left me for her carriage, her furniture, and her diamonds. She did quite right, and I don't bear her any grudge. I met her today, I continued carelessly. Where? Asked Prudence, looking at me and seeming to ask herself if this was the same man whom she had known so madly in love. In the Champs-Élysées. She was with another woman, very pretty. Who is she? What was she like? Blonde, slender, with side curls, blue eyes, very elegant. Ah, it was Olympa. She is really very pretty. Whom does she live with? With nobody, with anybody. Where does she live? Rue Tronchet, number... Do you want to make love to her? One never knows. And Marguerite? I should hardly tell you the truth if I said I think no more about her. But I am one of those with whom everything depends on the way in which one breaks with them. Now Marguerite ended with me so lightly that I realize I was a great fool to have been as much in love with her as I was. For I was really very much in love with that girl. You can imagine the way in which I said that. The sweat broke out on my forehead. She was very fond of you, you know, and she still is. The proof is that after meeting you today, she came straight to tell me about it. When she got here, she was all of a tremble. I thought she was going to faint. Well, what did she say? She said, "He is sure to come here," and she begged me to ask you to forgive her. I have forgiven her, you may tell her. She was a good girl. But, after all, like the others, and I ought to have expected what happened. I am even grateful to her, for I see now what would have happened if I had lived with her altogether. It was ridiculous. She will be very glad to find that you take it so well. It was quite time she left you, my dear fellow. The rascal of an agent, to whom she had offered to sell her furniture, went around to her creditors to find out how much she owed. They took fright, and in 2 days she would have been sold up. And now it is all paid? More or less. And who has supplied the money? The Comte de N. Ah, my dear friend, there are men made on purpose for such occasions. To cut a long story short, he gave her 20,000 francs. But he has had his way at last. He knows quite well that Marguerite is not in love with him. But he is very nice with her all the same. As you have seen, he has repurchased her horses. He has taken her jewels out of pawn, and he gives her as much money as the Duke used to give her. If she likes to live quietly, he will stay with her a long time. And what is she doing? Is she living in Paris altogether? She would never go back to Bougival after you went. I had to go myself and see after all her things, and yours too. I made a package of them, and you can send here for them. You will find everything, except a little case with your initials. Marguerite wanted to keep it. If you really want it, I will ask her for it. Let her keep it. I stammered, for I felt the tears rise from my heart to my eyes at the recollection of the village where I had been so happy, and at the thought that Marguerite cared to keep something which had belonged to me and would recall me to her. If she had entered at that moment, my thoughts of vengeance would have disappeared, and I should have fallen at her feet. For the rest, continued Prudence, I never saw her as she is now. She hardly takes any sleep. She goes to all the balls, she goes to suppers, she even drinks. The other day, after a supper, she had to stay in bed for a week, and when the doctor let her get up, she began again at the risk of her life. Shall you go and see her? What is the good? I came to see you because you have always been charming to me, and I knew you before I ever knew Marguerite. I owe it to you that I have been her lover, and also, don't I, that I am her lover no longer." "Well, I did all I could to get her away from you, and I believe you will be thankful to me later on." "I owe you a double gratitude," I added, rising, for I was disgusted with the woman, seeing her take every word I said to her as if it was serious. "You are going?" "Yes." I had learned enough. "When shall I be seeing you?" "Soon. Goodbye." "Goodbye." Prudence saw me to the door, and I went back to my own rooms with tears of rage in my eyes and a desire for vengeance in my heart. So Marguerite was no different from the others. So the steadfast love that she had had for me could not resist the desire of returning to her former life, and the need of having a carriage and plunging into dissipation. So I said to myself, as I lay awake at night, though if I had reflected as calmly as I professed to, I should have seen in this new and turbulent life of Marguerite the attempt to silence a constant thought, a ceaseless memory. Unfortunately, evil passion had the upper hand, and I only sought for some means of avenging myself on the poor creature. Oh, how petty and vile is the man when he is wounded in one of his narrow passions! This Olympa, whom I had seen, was, if not a friend of Marguerite, at all events the woman with whom she was most often seen since her return to Paris. She was going to give a ball, and, as I took it for granted that Marguerite would be there, I tried to get an invitation, and succeeded. When, full of my sorrowful emotions, I arrived at the ball, it was already very animated. They were dancing, shouting even, and in one of the quadrilles I perceived Marguerite dancing with the Comte de N, who seemed proud of showing her off, as if he said to everybody, "This woman is mine." I leaned against the mantelpiece, just opposite Marguerite, and watched her dancing. Her face changed the moment she caught sight of me. I saluted her casually with a glance of the eyes and a wave of the hand. When I reflected that after the ball she would go home, not with me but with that rich fool, when I thought of what would follow their return, the blood rose to my face, and I felt the need of doing something to trouble their relations. After that dance, I went up to the mistress of the house, who displayed for the benefit of her guests a dazzling bosom and magnificent shoulders. She was beautiful, and from the point of view of figure, more beautiful than Marguerite. I realized this fact still more clearly from certain glances which Marguerite bestowed upon her while I was talking with her. The man who was the lover of such a woman might well be as proud as Monsieur de N, and she was beautiful enough to inspire a passion not less great than that which Marguerite had inspired in me. At that moment, she had no lover. It would not be difficult to become so. It depended only on showing enough money to attract her attention. I made up my mind. That woman should be my mistress. I began by dancing with her. Half an hour afterward, Marguerite, pale as death, put on her wrap and left the ball.